able to avail of the recording. If anyone has any problem with that, now's the time to leave, I suppose. So thanks for that. Thanks, Susan. So record away there. So basically this evening, it's aimed at people that are interested in adventure racing, obviously, and it's not really aimed at people that can navigate. It's more the people that can't, are not afraid to, or maybe that can to a degree, but are afraid to maybe take up the map in their hand as a regular thing. A lot of us do a lot of let's say we're calling them solo adventure races. You know, it's so much easier to turn up and be able to follow a marked course. There is a lot of events out there, though, particularly on the team end of things in the adventure racing, that you do need to navigate. You need to be on a team with a navigator. You don't necessarily be able to navigate yourself, but I can assure you, if you have any navigational skills and abilities, you will be far more valued as regards a potential teammate for adventure racing. So we have a unique opportunity, I think, at the moment. You know, we can do our regular training, but we don't have events to distract us every weekend. So there is a unique opportunity there to acquire new skills. And one of those that we can do in this time is learn to navigate. So it may be a skill that's more natural for some people than others, but everybody can learn it, you know. And it's one thing that we'll always be learning. I'm navigating or trying to navigate for over 20 years, and I still make lots of mistakes, but I still would be regarded as a reasonable navigator by adventure racing terms. So, you know, there's plenty to learn, and, you know, all sorts of abilities and levels that people can navigate at, both for adventure racing and for the orienteering events that Colm and Clodagh are going to talk about later. So we have 4 on the panel. So I'm just going to switch over now to our first person. It's Paul Nolan. Paul's based down in South Wicklow. He has a little company there, One Step Moire, and he runs navigation courses aimed a lot at hill runners. He's done a lot with the IMRA crews, and he does one-on-one and small group stuff. So if anyone's interested in employing him further at a later date when we all get unrestricted, then please do. But we're going to switch over to Paul here now for his few insights, his tips and tricks for navigation. Paul.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to do just a very general overview and then a really, really quick compass demo. First things first, navigation is not difficult. There's no black magic. There's no serious arts to it. There's a few key skills and qualities which I feel are kind of important, and I've broken it down into 3 things. So the first one is observation. Simple looking around you, in front of you, behind you, remembering what you've seen, and as you do that, you're comparing it to this piece of paper that you have in your hand, which is your map. And your task as a navigator is to keep what you're seeing all around you fitting in with what you're seeing on that piece of paper. That piece of paper is the map. It has a load of symbols on it. The skill is to read the map. The map is like a language. It has symbols, keys, words. The stronger your vocabulary, the better you can communicate that language. So even now, while we're stuck at home, you can start. You don't even need to have the map. You can go online, Ordnance Survey, East West, Harvey, the UK. You can start looking at the legends because there's commonality in the symbols, but they're all slightly different. The different companies have different, there's slightly different symbols. Now, number 2, an important one, concentration. Simple as that, staying switched on. You have your skills, which is, you know, your compass bearing, your pacing, your reading contours, all that good stuff. And you have your task, which is getting you from where you want to be, from where you are to where you want to be. Those 2 together require focus, lots of it. Now, in your position as adventure racers, it's quite a big responsibility to navigate for a team. If you're doing that by yourself, or if you're sharing that out, or if you're all doing it, it's really good to have decided that beforehand. because it's not good for team unity to be sort of standing around in the circle of blame, or to be in a position where I thought you were navigating, I thought you were navigating, and it ends up nobody is. I'll give you just an example. 3 of us did the Wicklow Round way back 2009. 2 of us were experienced navigators. 1 was a novice. All 3 of us made individual saves. So you need to listen to people when they have, you know, when they're coming to you. You need to have the confidence to say, hang on a minute. Yeah, maybe that's right. So that brings me to number 3. I'm just conscious of time here. Number 3 is confidence. Confidence comes with, it's like you're running. It's time with a map in your hand. You become a better runner, better cyclist, better paddler if you train well. It's the same with the map. Time with the map in your hand. You gain confidence from your successes where you do it properly. You gain confidence from your mistakes. We all make them. They're brilliant for learning. When you learn from your mistakes, you will become a much improved navigator. Now, those 3, observation, concentration, confidence, it's like a triangle. At times, one of the 3 is going to be the most important. So let's just say you're running along a lovely track on a nice, clear, open day. You can see everything. So looking around you is really important. Concentration, yeah, a little bit, but it's not going to be as important. And then confidence, well, hey, look, I can see, I can go. Different story on a windswept mountain at night. You're not going to be able to see a whole lot, so you need to concentrate a whole lot more. And you also then need to be happy and confident in what you are doing based on all your practice, right? Overconfidence, lethal, 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 lethal. Underconfidence, just get out and practice and it'll come to you. That to me is it's a real overview of what you need, the mindset you need to go into it before you have the hard skills, the really important skills. That's all map movement. Where does this thing come in? Because I know it's kind of important. So give me 1 second. I'm just going to slot that like so. Now, that's working out, is it? Yes, it is. Perfect. So I want to go from here to here. On my compass, I have a little arrow in the middle, which is my direction of travel, which handily is lined up with the edge of the compass. Just going to use the edge. So I want to go from there to there. Just draw a little line, little arrow. Okay. On every map, there will always be a grid or a north line. So they will be like so. So plonk that back down. There's only one other piece that I can adjust, and it's this turning housing. So I'm going to line that up. I'm just going to twist this ever so slightly. Line them up. This nice printed grid and this nice printed grid. So your plastic grid and your paper grid. And then the very last thing, there's this needle which moves. And actually, it stays pretty much pointing the same direction all the time. It points north, and there we go. Needle and printed north arrow, all lined up, all pointed the same direction. Now, as long as I keep those 2 pointing the same direction and go that way, I will get myself from there to there, which is great. Using a compass, I can go from there to there. Let's have a look at this. What do we know about getting from there to there? Apart from the direction, we know absolutely nothing, because this is just a blank sheet of paper. It is all about reading the map to find out what is between there to there, because that's one option. The other option might be go along the perfectly good road and go that way. There could be a lovely big mountain in the way, which you don't want to go around. So my point is that map reading should always take priority over using one of these. Two together, very powerful, but map, map, map. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Paul. I think that's a really important question. A couple of people on the panel have been chatting about this online during the week about people look at navigation, oh, I can't use a compass, and they think they can't map read. You know, there's some quite competent orienteers out there that don't even bring a compass. Okay, if you're stuck in the middle of the Curragh or you're out on the top of Lough Derg, to my mind, you're an idiot if you don't have a compass if there's bad visibility. But, you know, the information is generally on the map. And if you know where you are on the map at any one time and you're able to read the features on the map, you know, even if visibility is poor, you still maybe are able to follow particularly what we'll talk about, line features, which are the roads and the tracks and the streams. So I think Paul makes a very good point there about the compass not being the be all and end all. He's showing you a great way. There's plenty of other help online on how to use a compass, but don't be put off on trying orienteering because you haven't got fully to grip with using a compass and taking a bearing. I generally, if I'm out orienteering, I would use a compass very little, being honest, you know. Maybe that's why I make mistakes, but you know, that's another thing. Okay.
I was very lucky. I started orienteering as a very young kid in school, and I had a teacher, two teachers actually, and neither of them would let us buy a compass for 1 year. And it was the best thing that they did for us, apart from bringing us out every weekend. So yeah, map, 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 all the way.
Okay, super. Now that's a great way to learn. But just to remind people, if you have any questions specifically for Paul or any of the other panel members, just say a question for Paul Nolan, Paul M, Moire, Colm, Clodagh, you know, just put them in the chat box or just put it as a general question, and then we'll deal with them either if we have time after the specific speaker, or more generally we'll just do a question and answer session probably at the end. So just put them in the chat box there and we'll deal with as many of them as we can. Okay, great. Thanks for that, Paul. We're going to switch over then to Moire. Moire is also known as Happy Out Adventures. She's based up in the Mournes, where she has a sort of a quite a good reputation over the last 2 years. I think you're on the go up there, isn't it, Moire? Something close to that, with a lot of one-on-one. I think she's done a lot of women's specific training, small group stuff, generally based in the Mournes, doing a lot of stuff for people preparing to do the ranking round and such like. And she's also a very well-known author. We'll circulate some links afterwards with some of the details of some of the books she's written, as well as the slides and a few other sources for further information that we'll circulate those after the meeting. So without further ado, Moire Sullivan.
Thanks, Paul. So basically, I really appreciate that Paul and both Pauls have reiterated that compass work isn't the be all and end all. For me, using a compass is like sex. Like if you've never had sex or you've never used a compass, you kind of think it's the be all and end all. And you see, sex and compasses are actually extremely important, like for making children or for finding yourself up a misty mountain. But once you've had sex or worked out how to use a compass, you soon realize it's grand. But there are better ways to spend your time, maybe reading your map more carefully, or maybe going to bed early with a cup of cocoa. So thanks for popping everyone's cherry there, Paul. Appreciate it. So I once had a brother and sister come along on a navigation course, and I decided, as I always do at the beginning courses, so do you have any experience about navigation? And the brother spoke up immediately and said, yeah, well, you know, I know a bit. I did a bit of in the Scouts. And then the sister turned up and said, I'm totally useless. Like, I'll get lost trying to get out of a paper bag. So then we got out on the hill, and it was what I suspected. They were actually at a very similar level. the brother hadn't mentioned to me his really poor sense of direction. And to be fair, the sister, she kind of was just slowly listening and taking things in. And she was kind of getting the hang of it by the end. So I want to give a lesson to the men. Women will typically undersell their navigation ability. And so we need your support and encouragement. And the first lesson to women is, will you stop putting yourselves down? Men aren't as good at navigating as you think. And I learned that men make navigation errors back in 2008. So I was young, fit, and a bit fast that year, and I was able to keep up with some aging and slowing male orienteers. So we were competing together in the IMRA Navigational Challenge, and we were looking for this control at a river junction, and I saw these extremely experienced, though increasingly decrepit orienteers running around like headless chickens. It was only when I got back to the finish that I realized what was going on. In adventure racing, we say what goes on tour stays on tour. So none of these men actually named the horrible mistake they had made on the course. And I realized that when the slower guys came across the line, that they thought that everyone who was on the podium just had made no mistakes whatsoever. But I've witnessed with my very own eyes, the mistakes are made, and even men make them. But I have to come clean. It was men who taught me how to navigate, not one single woman. It was men who taught me. And in particular, I'd like to mention a guy called Andrew McCarthy. He was looking for a partner for the 2-person 24-hour Rogaine Championship back in 2007. So I tagged along as his teammate. And I learned a lot from him in those 24 hours. And subsequently, whenever we were wrecking the Wicklow Round route together, Malcolm Gladwell says that you need 10,000 hours of practice in order to master a skill. And yes, I've had an 8-hour navigation course, but it was the hundreds of hours that I spent out in the mountainside with Andrew that taught me and grounded me in the basics. So the lesson is, if you get a chance to go out into a mountain with a navigator, please, from now on, don't say, sure, that's grand, I'll just follow him or her. Don't sit back, have your map out, look, watch where you're going, and ask questions. The fact that you're with a navigator is the most valuable thing possible. Use every opportunity to learn from somebody else. Now, being female and one who navigates is worth its weight in gold, especially when it comes to 2-person team events. In all the mountain marathons, more mountain marathons I've ever done in the elite category, there's often at any one time one all-female team. I remember seeing Tara McCoy and Jackie Toll out on day 2 of the mountain marathon, and they were having a lovely time. They were laughing and they were joking, and all they had to do was finish the race, and they had won. Now, I personally, when they've entered the elite categories, I've always ended up in mixed teams, but even then, there's only like 2 or 3 maybe in the actual event. So the lesson for men are, the odds are always better if you can enter a navigational event together with a girl. Often within 2-person teams, what happens though is the guy is the fastest runner who can navigate, and the woman runs behind or runs after him. Now, for the likes of Shane Lynch, this is a winning formula. For the rest of us mere mortals, I'm not sure it's a great idea. Navigation is tiring. It is better if it's done as a team rather than a solo effort. Navigation takes energy. So if we have this total amount of energy to complete a race, you need this to navigate, so then you have this to actually run fast. Now, what really frustrates a lot of novice navigators is that they're using this to navigate, so they've only got this little bit at the bottom to actually run fast. So it's really important then to remember that whenever you're adventure racing, because especially over long adventure races, because navigation is tiring, mistakes can be very easily made, because if you're the only one in the team who can actually read a map, you never get a break. So fortunately, our illustrious host there, Paul Mahon, and I have figured out the trick. In 2017, we entered the Moire Mountain Marathon together. Both of us can navigate. We marked up both maps. We both kept an eye on where we were going and we discussed our route choices. Admittedly, Paul was running faster than me, so we put more stuff in his bags so that we actually slowed, so we were running at the same speed. The strategy paid dividends. We finished a 2-day race in 10.5 hours. And what was remarkable about this was that we punched way above our weight. David Hicks and Neil Andrews are two of the best mountain runners in Northern Ireland. On a 30K Moire 7.7 race, Neil and David can run a 4 hours 10 on the course. I can run that course. The fastest I've done is 40 minutes slower. But on that mountain marathon, Paul and I finished nearly 1 hour ahead of them. The lesson is clever, team-based navigation can compensate for a lack of speed, because going in the right direction is always a distinct advantage. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Moira. Yeah, no, I just to reiterate, I think looking back and when we had a really good run there, whatever it was, 3 years ago in the Mourne Mountain Marathon, the one thing that really I recall from that, it was the first time, and I've done, I think as of this stage, I think I've done 16 or 17 Mourne Mountain Marathons with various partners, and varying degrees of success and lack of it, certainly very much in the early years. But the one thing that I got that year from you was concentration. That I have been often quite guilty of being social at the detriment of my navigation and just not concentrating. And I think you picked up on that since too. That I talk less now and I concentrate more, and it gets you more results. Paul Nolan touched on it earlier on. It's to try to get the balance between confidence and concentration. You can be confident in good weather.
I remember on that course, I said, let's run to the wall. And you said, okay, let's run to the call. And that would have been, if we had run to the call instead of the wall, which rhymes, we would have lost 10 minutes. And that it's as simple as that. So, and that's where concentration, yeah. And because if your concentration lapse, at least if you have a number of people keeping an eye, they can catch it really quickly. I think it also demonstrates, I did a solo Dennis Rankin round, and I did it in 21-24. And then I did a winter Dennis Rankin round with a team, and with yourself, Paul, and with the other people. And we did it in 21-24, despite the really horrendous conditions. And it just shows when you got more people navigating, it makes it easier and you go faster.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, great. Thanks for that, Moira. We're going to skip on then. So as I say, any questions that people have, I see a couple of them coming in there. So experience and navigator. I think we'll drop back to the questions afterwards. I think that might be easier, and just let people go, because I know Clodagh Mourne is there next. So Clodagh is a ex-junior Irish international, and she's on the senior squad now. So both Clodagh and Colm are very good orienteers as opposed to navigators for adventure racing specifically. Colm has made a big move over in the last couple of years with some great performances up in the Mourne Mountain Marathon in particular, and on some of the long distance IMRA races like the Reek Skyline. But Clodagh is very much on the specific orienteering side of things, so it'll be a little bit different to listen to what she has to say, and it'll be great to get her view of things. So Clodagh, take it away, please.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So I'm just basically going to be looking at the main kind of most important basic techniques, features you need to know, just completely from a map reading aspect. So I think I'm going to share my screen if I can get some slides, because I have slides. Oh yeah, there we go. So I'm just gonna, yeah. This picture basically, I think, just demonstrates pretty well, breaks it down, the main things you have to do when you're map reading, and kind of to be able to get it in steps, especially if you're only beginning, it kind of makes it easier in your brain to break it down. So firstly, obviously, looking at the map, kind of big picture. As soon as you pick up the map at the start of your mountain marathon or whatever, looking at the map, saying, okay, where's high, where's low, where am I going to be going in total, and then start looking at the actual detail of the map, maybe making plans for your first few controls and setting off, and then picturing, what will I be seeing on the way? Do I need to look for roads? Am I looking for certain types of, am I looking for hills? What terrain? And then lastly, and this is still very important, but kind of the final step, definitely the map reading would be the first step, is just keeping track of your direction and your orientation, making sure you're not going the wrong way, because there's no point being able to read the features if you're not actually going in the right direction. So I've just broken down kind of the basic features that you should be able to recognize. And these slides are going to be shared after, so hopefully you'll all be able to see this. So main colors are a really important thing to be aware of. Orange, as you can see here, means open land. That's your most runnable terrain, apart from roads or paths. That's your grass, your fields. That's what you want to be on if you can be on it. Because it's just faster running, easier to get places. Then your white is kind of runnable forest, still pretty quick, but obviously slower than running on open fields. And then green, anything green, you don't really want to be running through. It's just denser forest, maybe bushes, trees are close together, and it's not very pleasant. In general, I would say blue, anything blue is a water feature. So a stream, a marsh, a river. Anything black is a man-made feature. So as you can see here, the fences, the paths, the roads, and anything brown is an earth feature. So here we have an earth wall at the bottom. And if that was black, if that symbol there was black, that would actually be a stone wall, because then it would be a man-made feature. So it just shows you that some features are pretty much exactly the same. So the color matters, because it tells you that it's a different feature. And even the most important features, especially if you guys are just beginning in navigation or don't have necessarily that much experience, are your linear features. So your roads, your tracks, your footpaths, your fences, your walls. The thicker the path or the track, the easier it is to run on, the bigger it is, the easier it is to spot. You definitely want to be on those if you can be. And then, as you can see, the more dotted a track or a path is, the smaller it is, the less distinct it is, and the harder it is to find. It's definitely good to be on roads or tracks or paths. They're the easiest features in the sense of you can see them on the map, but also it's really easy to keep track of where you are when you're on a road, as opposed to when you're running through terrain and you're trying to spot features, but you don't know necessarily what you're looking for. Am I in the right area? Whereas when you're on a path, it's quite easy to tell where you are. So sometimes, even if a route on a path maybe looks longer than just going straight through terrain, it can still be useful if you know you won't get lost on it. Yeah, no chance of getting lost, as I was saying. Well, less chance. There's always a chance of getting lost. And then it also, yeah, it simplifies the map. So another thing is, especially when you're beginning, you kind of, every time you look at the map, it slows you down significantly. You still should look at your map as much as possible, but you might end up stopping and starting. So if you're on a path, you can kind of just pelt down the path or the road or the track or whatever it is. And you don't have to check your map as much. You can move quicker without any fear of getting lost. Yeah, and then it is important to be aware of, there's no point running 2 kilometers on a path and then realizing that you didn't know where you were meant to leave the path to get to the control. So that's what catching features are for. They're the kind of features that when you get close to the control, you know how you're actually going to reach the control. So maybe there's a wall leading off the path to your control and you can look out for it and follow that. Or maybe there's a fence, whatever it is, you need to be looking out for that as you run. And then finally, your orientation, which is also very important. Paul was talking about our taking bearings, which is obviously a good thing to know how to do. But even I would start simpler than that, with when you pick your map up, straight away, just fold it into the area that you're maybe concentrating on for now, or will be concentrating on for the next few controls. Because then every time you look up and you look down again, you don't have to have this huge map and go, okay, where am I? I've completely lost track of where I am. If you've got it neatly folded, you can just look down, look up, keep running. And another thing that goes along with that is thumbing, which essentially is just keeping your thumb right beside where you are on the map, so that every time you look down to try and read the map, you can see where you are and you can see where you want to go. Because it's another thing that wastes time, you looking down at the map and losing track of where you are. And another really important thing, I feel I'm in danger of giving too many important things that it's hard to keep track of all the important things, but staying in contact with the map is really important. And that just means essentially keeping track of where you are by checking everything on the map. So whether that be ticking off features, when you see a path, there's that path. Have I seen that wall that I'm supposed to see midway to the control yet? If not, why haven't I seen it? Have I gone too far and I didn't spot it? Have I not gone far enough and I need to just keep running? And knowing maybe why you haven't seen certain things is an important tool to have. And then finally, and this one I think is crucial and easy to forget, is just every time you leave your control, make sure you know where you are in the map. Because a common factor is people coming into their control, maybe they've made a mistake on the way to this control, and they're just so delighted to have found it, or maybe they had a really good control and they want to make up time, but anyway, they sprint out of the control on the way to the next control without even checking where they're supposed to be going, just with the aim of gaining time. And it's just, you'll probably get lost again. So every time you come out of the control, check, is my map orientated? Do I have a plan? Do I know where I'm going? And if you do, you hopefully should be safe, and just re-implementing all those tools again for the next control. So yeah, that's pretty much it from me. Nothing too complicated in there, but just basic tools that are really important to have. And if you don't have them, you will suffer. But sorry, I can't find out.
Positive, Clodagh. You won't suffer. You'll just be scratching your head in the forest.
If you do have them, you'll have an extra advantage.
You learn more from your mistakes.
Yeah, that's a bit
you tend to learn
bleak of me. I just can't work out how to get back into the main.
It's okay. Anyway, really good points there. And I said that at the end there, your point about staying in contact with the map. People, you know, might not be familiar with that term, but it's basically knowing where you are at all times. Okay. And as you're approaching a control, as Clodagh says, you might be so relieved to get to control that you don't realize that you've come in from maybe a 90-degree different direction than what you're aiming to come in from. So don't run off then straight ahead till you're sure that's the right direction to go to. I think it would be a technique in general where you spot your control and you see it, that it's in the right location, that it be it, you know, the corner of a wall or down in a depression or something like that. You see it, but you're already planning what direction you're going to for the next control, rather than getting to the control, hearing your beep, and then looking at your map. Would that be fair enough, Clodagh? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's an important thing to have.
Okay, super. As I say, we're gonna share Clodagh and Colum's slides, and I have some general resource information we're going to put on afterwards. So keep the questions coming in there. I see one coming in from Sorry, Moire?
Can I just add one point about planning on the way out? Use your uphills to plan. If you're going uphill, it's really easy to plan your next, rather than trying to plan while you're running on a flat or down.
Yep, super. Okay. Thanks a lot. Okay, Colum's joining us from across the water. We're not sure how locked down he is, but he has access to a computer screen anyway. So the floor is yours, Colum. Looking very trendy with your headphones.
Oh, thank you, Paul. My favourites.
Your hairdresser is closed, I see.
Sorry?
Your hairdresser is closed.
Yeah, no, the hairdresser's been closed for too long for me, but yeah, no, so hello everybody. As Paul mentioned, I'm based in England at the moment. I probably don't know an awful lot of you, but I come from an orienteering background, done a decent amount of mountain running as well through my whole upcoming as a junior and in recent years as a senior. And I've had some success there, but more so in orienteering, which would have always been my focus, and have a couple of Irish Championships victories and run the World Champs a couple of times. So yeah, I'll focus more so on the navigation, and I'm also going to see, can I work out the technology to share PowerPoint? So can you guys see my slide at the moment? Would somebody able to indicate? Yeah, cool. I'll go into presentation mode. Perfect. So I'm going to focus my part of the presentation on the kind of crossover between orienteering and other navigation races, so the sort that you would encounter in adventure racing. Just actually to check as well, can you guys see the everything, or is there part of it blocked out by, because I know Cloud had a little black screen on the side. I don't think it blocked anything important, but maybe it was just for me.
I think it's fine, Colum.
Cool. Yeah, so focusing on the crossover and navigation between orienteering races and other races. So in general, in orienteering, the kind of two big things that we use most are contours. So the contours indicate the height that you're at and whether you're going uphill and downhill and the shape of the land in general. And alongside that, you use the compass. So you're always there's lots of other features that you use along the way, but you're always checking, all right, well, first, am I going up or down? Can I see that hill or a re-entrant or a spur? And just checking your compass all the time to make sure I am going the right direction. I haven't just making stuff up and think I'm seeing the right features. And then also, and you will use it in orienteering and paths, but less so at the high level. But in adventure racing, I think there'll be, and stuff like mountain marathons, there's often a lot more option of paths. And that's just an important thing to know, because if you have the opportunity to take paths, it's always a good idea, because the navigation is going to be a lot easier than going over mountains and that. If I continue on and just go through a little bit here about contour lines. So this just kind of shows the different features, how you'll encompass contours on a map. So on the left hand side, you kind of have the 3D shape of a hill. And then we're shown on the right hand side in the square that's been highlighted, the 2D equivalent that you'll see on a map. So at the bottom, you can see these, every fifth line or so is a darker line, which we call an index contour. And that just makes it easier to identify how much height you're climbing, so you don't have to count every contour. As you'll see, the third one up that I'm circling, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, says 100. So that means they're at 100 meter height there. And then they go up another 2, and that's 200. And then this also darker one in between will be 150 meters. So you can use those just to get a quick gauge of how much climb you're going to be doing and how hilly or how steep the climb really is. But the contours aren't just for getting a sense of how high you're going to be. If we can see on the left that this hill has kind of a flat section on top, and that's represented here in the right hand side by a lack of contours. Because it's flat, means there's no change. So there's no contours here. And then going down the side at the top again, you'll see where the contours are really close together, it's much steeper. And the same on the other side. And then it's a bit less steep going up the spur. And that is probably worth noting, generally running up spurs. So a spur being kind of like a pointy out section of a hill, or a re-entrant, which is the opposite. It's kind of like a little bowl into it. It will generally be a bit quicker than just going up the steeper sections. So just a good thing to note. But understanding the contours is probably the most important thing. So when you're out in the mountain, you can really just recognize any features and hills, etc., so you know where you are. This again, just another 2D, 3D model to try and give you an idea of what the contours are going to look like, because it is really important that you master, I'd say contours is the first thing on the map. If you can see them on a 2D map and make a 3D map in your head, it'll just make it an awful lot easier when you look around in the mountain and you see, oh, there's a small hill. Where is there a small hill on the map? So again, at the 2D model at the bottom, we have a small hill on the right, which we can tell because the contours join up and there's only 2 of them. And that'll be this hill here. And then in between, this will be a reentrant coming in. So a little bowl between 2 hills, and that's coming in there. And then up on top, we have another bigger hill. So again, that's represented by the bigger hill on the left. So hopefully that will help give you guys a little bit of an understanding. And again, I'm going to send these slides out afterwards so you can have those to look back on if you need them for reference in future. Some tips then for compass, because, well, Moire and Paul and Lough have all highlighted this really well already, but it's the compass, like we said, it is important to use, but it's always kind of your secondary, especially in stuff like mountain marathons and adventure races, when you're going to most need it is if you get into really misty conditions, where you kind of do need to know how to use a compass because you won't be able to see the features around you, and to get off the mountain or to go in the right direction, using it will be important. But in general, you're often going to have a lot more features and a lot more to see around you, and understanding the features is more important and will make it easier to navigate. A couple of notes and tips for using it. You've already been explained to, I think, on how to use it, so I won't go through all the details, but just take your time when you're taking your bearing. Make sure that you have it set and then you are going the right direction. The worst part is you just take 1 second bearing and you're like, oh yeah, I'm good, and it actually just hadn't set in time. So just make sure you take a moment with that. Look up whenever you can. As we said, the compass is really useful to make sure you're on the right direction, but if you can see features around you, that's just 10 times better, because you can tell already. You might even be able to see the control or feature that you're looking for if you can see a big hill in the distance that you know is the one you're going to. And even if you're looking for something but you can see a hill in the distance past it, that can also be really useful to just note something in the distance like a hill and say, okay, I know we're going that direction, we're not going to go that far, but I don't need to look at my compass again because I know I can just keep running towards that hill and just read the map for the features closer. So just those sorts of little things. Make sure anyway, always keep your head up and try and see as much of the terrain around you as you can. That would, I'd say, be one of the most important things in orienteering and any sort of navigation race. Just take in as much as you can from both the map and then look around and try and put the map to the ground. How you lose time. So, I mean, it happens to all of us all the time. I've had loads of big mistakes and small mistakes, but the biggest is always navigation errors. So you think you're somewhere where you're not, where you can't find a control because you're going in circles, or yeah, you're just in the wrong place and you haven't got the navigation correct. Obviously, this is the stuff we want to avoid. At the bottom, I've got running speed because, I mean, the speed that you're able to go in a race, whether that's running or hiking up a hill, or is obviously important, but it's kind of always secondary to navigation because it's easy to make a 30-minute mistake in some of these longer races, and it's very hard to be 30 minutes quicker than somebody over a section. And then in between, there's route choices, which will also cost you time, and depending on how you're going. And that is basically what I'm going to move on to next, is route choices. So with route choices, it's kind of just a few different things to consider. So when you're looking at a map, you want to see the terrain you're looking at. So so when you're considering different routes, basically between two points, so either 2 controls or from a path into a control, or anything along those lines, that's what we consider a route choice, where you have different options and one might be quicker than another. You need to know, so you need to consider what sort of terrain the different options are. Naturally, paths and roads are much quicker. Open mountain is in between, and as Toda said earlier, forest is generally slower. and make sure you're clear on what sort of forests you're looking at as well. Like, does it look like it's going to be really thick and very hard to get through, or at least if it's runnable, it might be worth taking a shortcut through. Obviously, you need to consider distance too. So if you are taking a path or road route, it might be a lot further around, and that can be fine as well. But there's only so far you want to go around too. So just be conscious of the distance. The height, again, climbing over a big hill can be really easy navigation. But if it's an awful lot more climb, naturally it's going to take a lot more energy, and it's also just might not be quicker because you might be able to go around it much simpler, and the navigation could still be reasonably straightforward. But it's important to know your own strength, I would say, is probably the most important thing. Some people know that if you've less experience with the navigation, maybe stick to the simpler navigation routes the whole time. If you're if you came from a more road running background and you're fast on that, but you're less confident in the terrain, maybe consider paths and roads option more. I would say always be conscious. Don't go out of your way to go for one or the other, but you can take your own factors into account. So just be aware of all those. I'm going to give a couple of examples too, just so you guys get at least a bit of a picture of a map too and what it might look like. So in this case, this is a map from the Moire Mountain Marathon last year, day 2, 2019. So I've put in a control here. So, well, these controls are already here. So the triangle at the bottom would be your start point, and the red circle that I've circled at 122 is your first control. So I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to have a quick think about this and try and see how many different routes, how many main routes. There'll always be lots of little variants, but just take 30 seconds to yourself to think and see what routes would I consider here. And I'll keep going then after you've had about 30 seconds to think on it.
Go on. There's so many variations, there's more than that.
I don't know what options you guys found, and there will be some others in between, but these would be kind of the main ones, I'd say. So we have the left around route choice, A, which follows road the whole way up here. And then there's a little path you can come in on this into the control. You've got the green option, which follows a wall around here and a little path going the whole way around. So both A and C climb an awful lot less and then come into the middle here, or B, which climbs a lot more and goes through the open mountain, but it's not an awful lot more because you still only drop a little bit coming into the control, but it's a bit more technical navigation. So I don't have an answer now to tell you which
terrain is terrible going up B, which is something I had to consider.
Yeah, exactly. So local knowledge as well always be. Sorry, you keep going, Paul.
No, as you say, local knowledge. I think A, judging by the splits that day, proved to be the fastest way because there's a really good path the whole way up to that dam at the top of the map. I think, and I wouldn't have spotted that at all. Being honest, I might have considered B or C, but not A.
Yeah, well, I actually think the fastest route on the day was, well, it's hard to say, but there were a few people with pretty quick times in A, and then there was one that took B and were a couple of minutes quicker. But I think it's fairly, the point is, I think, it's A could have been quicker for some people and B could have been quicker for others. So there's not usually a definitive answer on it, and it's just worth thinking about it yourself and like that, knowing your own strengths. But yeah, as Paul said too, the terrain up through B can be a bit brutal at times. So and another one, just again to get you guys familiar with maps and thinking about this sort of stuff. So I've highlighted, some of you guys might know this area from having thought about doing the Wicklow Round or already having completed it. I know Moire and Paul are all finishers, so they'll have done this before. And again, if you want to just take 15 or 20 seconds from this triangle to start to this control up on top, and just try to recognize the contours, so you get the shape of the hills and the paths. So basically different options that you could take for this one. I'll give you a few seconds, but I won't linger too long. And then I'll put up some of the options that I would have considered. Cool. Right. Hopefully some of your options were along these lines. Again, there definitely could be other things to consider. You could go the whole way down here, but it just seems quite long. So just contrasting the different routes. So A and B both stay quite high here, and they're on a nice path running down to Kanturk. And then A cuts down to a path through the forest and climbs up. B goes straight down through some terrain, which is quite rough, but it saves a lot of distance on A going around because it goes much straighter to the control. C possibly does the least climb, but goes through terrain the whole way here, but does get some nice path here and cuts back onto a similar line. And then D runs down a nice path for a while and gets onto this track too. So again, I don't have an idea of which is the best. I've run a couple of them as well when I was previously considering doing a Wicklow Round, and I don't know which way Moire than the two poles went, but it's just worth knowing that these sort of things are all different things to consider when you're looking at routes, and can be an important factor, especially depending on what suits you. I think I might have been tempted to lean towards C and D, but I suspect that the other guys probably might have gone B. I think is also quite popular. That is most of what I'd thought through. I also just put some links in, which I don't really need to talk through now so much, but there, especially when you guys get the presentation as resources. So yeah, just a few different places where you can, some of the better navigation training options in Ireland for adventure racing. So the Mourne Mountain Marathon, as the guys have talked about. The Wicklow Rogaine is a great event, and the IMRA Nav challenges are really good. They're perfect for a shorter race and training, a couple of Sundays in August, September. And then there's just lots of orienteering events. And like the guy said earlier, I just urge you as much as possible, if you're going out into the mountains for a walk or a hike or run, to bring a map yourself and set yourself some checkpoints you want to go to. And yeah, try and go and find them. Just get used to using maps and getting used to navigating. Yeah, so that was all I had to say. Thank you guys very much.
That's great. That's great, Colm. Thanks. Yeah, it's something I think, very much, a lot of us, we go running in the hills all the time, but we very seldom, well, maybe you do, but I very seldom bring a map. And even if you know the area, it's something Clodagh touched on earlier on. You could be running along a track and be counting off junctions, be counting off, let's say, a change of vegetation where your map goes from being an open mountain to the corner of the forest, and in each case move your thumb along the map. That's what she's talking about. So then when you glance down at the map, you know that you're a little bit further on from where your thumb was at that corner of the forest or something like that, and it just saves you so much time rather than having to stop and try to figure it out. I think we'll just, that's brilliant. So we're going to sort of go through, I've just been trying to see a few questions coming in. I might miss some, so Sean's going to remind me, but I think what's relevant here is there was a question there about pacing. Sorry, about knowing how far you've traveled and whatever else. So yes, there is the possibility of using a Garmin type GPS watch. In most events, it's not permitted. In some events, it is. If it's not permitted, the general way of sort of gauging distance, apart from the features on the map, would be pacing and timing. So, Colm, you might want to touch on that. It's a type of thing of to know how long it takes you to cover, say, 100 meters on open mountain terrain on the flat, how many paces it takes you to walk up a steep hill, run fast down a steep hill. I know I did a really good orienteering training workshop this time last year down in Glendalough that the Irish Orienteering association organised. But do you want to just touch on that briefly, Colin?
Yeah, I can briefly. So yeah, pacing would be a technique that is used in orienteering. So it's generally, you can do it kind of just yourself on a weekend if you measure out 100 meters, say, on your watch in terrain and measure it out in different sections and basically count how many steps. So you might, to simplify it, just use how many times you like took a step with your left foot. So might be 60 steps in 100 meters, or I'm not sure what the normal number will be, and you get used to that. And obviously it might be more or less for uphill and downhill. I don't personally use it myself very much because it just takes an awful lot of concentration, and they only have so much energy, but it is used by some. I would personally I'd do just a lot more, mostly just experience. You kind of get used to being out in the maps and getting a feel for, oh, I'm running between those 2 points. I know roughly how long that'll take me. It's easier as the course goes on. At the start, you know, as you're getting into the scale, it's a bit trickier, so it might take more time and just make sure I'm reading more of the features. Later on, once I've been on the map for a while, it's much easier to get a feel for, oh, hang on, I should be getting to around where the control is. I need to think about stopping if I don't see something soon. Yeah, so I would use a lot of kind of general feel and just more reading the map, picking features to make sure I don't go too far. But pacing is a technique that some people use. Yeah,
well, I would say that the pacing and the timing thing are probably more useful for people at a lower level than you. Like you're a guy that has won Irish championships in orienteering. Most people that are starting off, you know, it stops you making mistakes. And what Claude was saying there about following line features, it's brilliant, but you need to know how far you've gone along those line features if you're not going to reach let's say a track junction, or where a track crosses a stream or something like that. And I just find myself as a sort of a in between navigator that, you know, pacing, you know, obviously, you know, it's going to be very hard to pace a kilometer. But if you have to pace 150 meters, and you know, in such and such a terrain, it's, for me, it's around about 45 double paces per 100 meters. So I know that after whatever 120 meters, I should be getting near, 120 double paces that I should be getting near. Sorry, oh, I'm trying to remember.
I found that I learned an awful lot about pacing and timing by actually taking a year out from running and doing my mountain leader, which involves hiking. And I think what the problem is with a lot of us is that we're coming from a running background and we're trying to run and navigate that at the same time, whilst actually slowing down and going for a walk, and learning timing and pacing then and speeding up again, I found really beneficial in improving my navigation at speed. Like, even, for example, walking with a map means I'm not worried about going fast or keeping up with people. I can really look at the map, I can stop. So I would recommend people to take walks and navigate and learn that way.
I definitely agree with Moire on that too. I think one of the best orienteers that we've had in Ireland, Marcus Pinker, has said he put a lot of his understanding of maps down to making maps, which was essentially just him being out in the mountain and drawing maps. And he just got a much better feel for what going up or down 10 meters, what the contours felt like, what the distance felt like. And although it's not the same as pacing, as running fast, you just got a much better feel for the mountain, and there's just more experience in total.
Brilliant. Yeah, great points there. I think, you know, again, we're in the situation where we might only be able to go walk in our local park or something like that. But, you know, if you're going out for a social walk with a family or friend or somebody in your bubble, you know, it'd be great to be picking up that type of detail off maps.
For example, my orienteering has improved because I've got a 5 and 7 year old, and so we do the yellow course together and we walk it. And my map reading has improved by doing the simplest courses. So don't knock going slow or doing the simpler orienteering courses at a walk with your kids.
Yeah, like the orienteering events, which Irish orienteering clubs refer to, will have links included in what stuff we're going to send out afterwards. But there are various different grades of courses. But don't be tempted just because you're somebody that can run the Wicklow Way Ultra that you should do the hardest course. And even if it's only 10k long, you know, you're probably better off to take something of a lesser navigational challenge, something like the Red course, which is designed for runners with easier navigation, and have a good experience rather than being a headless chicken out, taking 3+ hours and possibly not finishing one of the longer courses. Just a point that's come up then on the, and as I said, panel members jump in here anytime you want, a point about scales. So in the orienteering maps, you tend to have different scales. So something like around UCD, it might be 1 to 5,000 or 1 to 7,500. Your general orienteering events will be 1 to 10, 1 to 15,000. And then on the likes of the Harvey's map, the adventure series from OSI, and East-West maps is maybe 1 to 25,000. So get familiar with the scale of the map before you start running off and wonder why, you know, what you thought was 100 meters because you're used to a Harvey's map is actually, you know, 200 on a different scale of map, you know. There's usually on the orienteering maps, there's usually a little scale at the bottom of the map. So it'll show you what 50 and 100 meters are. And it's a technique that I use is how many index fingers are on that. So, you know, that will give you an idea if you're going from A to B and there's 2 of these guys, how many are 2 of these things on the scale. I see Claude and Colin laughing at me, but you know, that's just a simple way to get an idea and not to make big errors. There was also a good question there from, I think it was Kathy, about transitioning between foot and bike maps when the scale is sometimes different. This touches again on something relating to the team adventure races where you're swapping disciplines as well as swapping maps and scales, and it can really be useful if you have at least 2 navigators on the team, and that you generally will find one will be better at the foot navigation and one will be better at the bike navigation, and those skills quite often will correspond with how much time they spend on the hills on foot and how much time they spend on the bike. So let's say I would traditionally have been, let's say, better on the bike and Bike-O maps, or sort of, you know, the maps that you might be using an ordnance survey map to get between forests. Then you will go into the forest and you would be on maybe a 1 to 10,000 map for an hour's orienteering. So it's really good if you have different people that have their strengths at these things. Paul Nolan mentioned that earlier about, you know, having people on the team, everybody taking responsibility for something, you know, and be that if one person can't navigate at all, you know, that person could be responsible for making sure that everybody is eating and drinking enough on the team. It's not to do with navigation, but everybody should have a positive contribution role to make. And this navigation is it's a hard thing, particularly for the longer team adventure races. You're out there for a day, sometimes multiple days with very little sleep. And it's really important that people take a turn at navigating if they can do that. And if they're not able to navigate, then they're looking after the navigators. Because if your navigator doesn't get enough to eat or drink and they start to get tired and, you know, lose concentration, they'll make mistakes. They make mistakes. Everybody has more of an effort to get back on course. Everyone's peed off. And, you know, there's no point in blaming them if you haven't been able to do something positive to contribute to the team's effort. Sorry, that's just my little pet subject. So yeah, actually, this is a question for anyone. I regard navigation as the number 2 skill in team adventure races. So anybody want to pick the number 1 skill, they can put it in the chat box while I look at there's any more questions that we'd like to put to the panel. There's Fletcher there to talk about simple things like the moon. how to find your way back. Yes, really good point there. If people want to read that. Motivator photographer. No, I don't agree. Keep going on that. I'll just scroll back through the questions here. Sean, did you have anything you picked out there from the questions? Transitioning from food.
Maybe I could, can I just add, I tried to, in a 4-person team, an adventure race, there was one, I was racing with you, Paul, the Beast, and I navigated on one section, and actually I found it, you can only go as fast as the navigator, and I just wasn't fast enough for the 3 guys. So I had to hand the map off. I couldn't do the role. So I think it's a bit hard whenever you have 4-person teams and there has to be 1 female. I've only heard of one successful time when a girl has been the navigator in a 4-person team, and it was a multi-day race where it was by day 3 or day 4, and the guys were totally fried, and she was coming into her own. So I think you have to also think about the gender role there, and maybe women are just mandatory kit in the 4-person team. We don't know, but I think we have to just also we just need to see if really that's the navigator is really a role in that scenario. That's why I concentrate on 2-person teams when we can come to more to the 4.
Or you just do it with somebody that's slower like me. But no, just I think it's a good point, but I wouldn't put it down to gender at all, Moira. I'd put it down more to people's physical ability, because you know, if somebody else is on a team and there's the girl isn't always the slowest, and particularly over distance and time. So yeah, I've been on plenty of teams, and you just, as I say, you have to look after the navigator in terms of trying to support them and be that feeding them or making sure they're drinking enough or carrying some of their gear. That's, again, it's a team technique that we're going to talk on some of the other adventure racing topics, but it's not down to gender. It's down to, as you say, the energy level that you need as a navigator. There's no point in you being the weakest runner having to navigate on foot, because everybody else will be just trotting circles around you and up at the controls and waiting for you, and it's not great. Yeah. So Sean, have you picked out any more questions there that we might not have touched on? I know some of them have been answered in the chat box. Calling Sean, I think. Sorry. So I'm just going to put up a couple of slides then, if there's nothing else.
Paul, I just saw one about when you're near control but you can't find the control.
Oh yeah.
So
I'm interested.
well, what I would do, I don't know, this isn't a solution, but normally I think it's no harm just to stop for a second and just look at your map, and even first of all, just look around you and say, what are the big features near me that I know I'll be able to spot on my map? Is there anything large? Are you on top of a hill? Something really distinctive. And then if you can find that on your map, great. And you might have a sense of, okay, I was too low, I was too high, I hadn't quite gone far enough. But if you're really, really lost, or you really are confused as to what's going on, I would say retrace your steps until the last point where you knew where you were. And you probably actually won't lose as much time as you would if you were flapping about looking for the control. So even if that's just 50 meters behind and you say, okay, there's that feature, and try approach the control again, reading your map this time.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, I would regard yourself and Colm as being more expert navigators than me. The one thing that I'd probably try and pick up on, as you said, bigger features, but line features. So if you're near a stream or a wall or a track and you don't know which track you're on, try to find out, is that track going north, and then look at all the tracks running north south on the map, and try and pick up the details from that. So yeah, it's great to know that.
I think also something I say, Paul, is whenever we come into control in an adventure race or mountain marathon, you get us all to spread out. So
that's to find the control. Yeah.
Find the control as well. So it's not just we're all in one little huddle looking for the control.
Yeah, if you're out on an open mountain and you're in mist or something like that, and you're looking for a re-entrant, that's actually is a Colm touched on it. Re-entrant. It's one of these words that comes up regularly in navigation events. A re-entrant is basically, I don't know how you, a hollow or something, I think, but it's basically like a small valley. So it could be where a stream is running down through, or a stream might have originated in originally, but it's pretty much like an indentation into the side of a hill. I think, would that be correct, Colin?
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair description. Yeah, I'm trying to, it's not the easiest to describe, but yeah, essentially kind of like a little, yeah, hollowed out area, bowl kind of coming up between two hills is kind of the main part, usually. So it's, if you know what a spur is, it's the exact opposite of that. So instead of like a part sticking out of the side of a hill, it's like a little bit coming into the side of the hill. Hopefully that did it some justice.
Okay, so just one other quick question there, because I'm conscious we're running over time, but I suppose people can leave if they want. We still have 69 people, so we must be doing okay. But I have a silver compass with a very stiff housing. Any advice from Kay? I think that's just dirt and time probably in it. You could
then send it back to the shop where you bought it. Silver compass quality control is absolutely dire.
I would suggest you try and clean it with a very thin cloth, and maybe put some WD-40 or something in it and see does that help. But I don't know
if it's worth anything, I actually use a compass with solid housing, so you can't twist it at all, and it's just so you can at least line up the north on the compass with the north lines on the map and orientate yourself from that and work out your direction, but it's not the same as a full traditional bearing that people might take.
Yeah. Okay, great. I'm just going to share a screen then at the end, just if we can. If somebody can make me screen to do. Okay. Control home. So basically, these are just something we're going to send round. So it's a lot of this is at Orienteering.ie, which is our Orienteering Association. The basic of Orienteering, I've mentioned there about this different scales on the map. So if you look at the bottom, that's a 1 to 10,000, and this is where I talked about how many of these black and white rectangles my index finger will cover, and then we think there's references there for legends. Claude has mentioned about the different features, so we won't go across those. The forestry terrain in terms of runnability, white is forest. This is the one thing that I used to think about, why isn't white open ground, but it's fast running forest. Light green, slow running forest. Dark green, walk, fight, avoid where possible. Just, you don't want to go in there. Yellow, open ground, grass or open hillside, usually reasonably fast running as well. Control descriptions, we have references to those, and references to other way to orienteering. We have several places in Ireland where there are permanent orienteering courses. There's references there at orienteering.ie, there's references at quilta.ie. We have a new app that some guy in Australia has started called MapRun F. And during this lockdown, a lot of people in the Irish Orienteering Association have set up courses around the country. So I'd encourage everybody to have a look at that link, download the app and search in your area. What it is basically you can have the map on your phone, or you can download a paper map and print it off. And you run with the map, you go through the start, it picks up that you're in the location where the start is, it gives you a ping that you've started, and you run around, and then afterwards it'll show you your route and it'll ping at every control. So you don't have to have this SI card or anything on your finger. It's like that, but it's a really good resource. The maps tend to be relatively simple, so it's really good for beginners and improvers to use. Where to train and compete, there's reference there to the Wicklow Orienteering Club and all the upcoming events. Now, it's quite likely that orienteering events will be first up to bat, because they tend to be relatively dispersed events with smaller numbers. So, there should be an opportunity, hopefully in April and May, to do orienteering events before, I think, adventure race events start off. I have a couple of things then there. I mentioned on bike orienteering, it's something that a lot of people will do in the adventure racing, picking a fast gravel or tarmac road is usually much better than a shorter, rough, muddy trail. Gradual downhills are brilliant. You pick up and maintain 20, 30 kilometers an hour compared to a steep downhill where you're pulling your brakes. It's a way also, if you're allowed, as you usually are, to have an odometer on your bike, that you could have somebody on your team that's not navigating to do your distance. So if you know that one square on your OSI map is 1 kilometer, you can tell them, I'm looking for a lane after 1.5 kilometers. So they tell you, okay, we're at 1.4K here. So it also involves different people on your team. So there's a general point there is about, Moira touched on it there, match your speed and your ground with your navigational ability and you don't get lost. We have all experienced this as beginner navigators where somebody is walking or gently running around the course. And I remember a girl, Deirdre O'Neill, one of my early times of orienteering, I thought I was a great lad running around the IMRA courses in a reasonable time, but I passed her 3 times on a blue course one day and she still beat me. You know, and I was a fair bit faster than her, but she could navigate and I couldn't. So as a roundup, we'll say, go for it and enjoy it. You will make mistakes, but you will learn from your mistakes. So thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks Moira, Clodagh, Colm and Paul Nolan. As I say, Moira is Happy Out Adventures. Paul is One Step More. Ed Nyland is another person who's contributed to some of my references here that is also going to be doing some navigation courses, but it's a skill we all can learn and now is a great opportunity to learn it. So thanks everybody for your attendance tonight and hopefully we'll see more of you on more Adventure Racing Ireland information evening and events in time. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Thanks, Moira. Thanks, Paul, Clodagh, Colm, Paul Tierney. Oh, there's Shane Kenny. Shane, you're going to learn to navigate. Might slow you down a little.
That's what I'm trying to do anyway.
Have you tried to learn, have you?
I'm trying to. I was meaning to go up to Moira there before all this madness happened. So
Yeah.
Asher, look, I'm looking to try a few of those rounds as well, you know.
Asher, just use the GPS, it'd be grand.
Not allowed on the Wicklow Round.
Dennis Rankin's fine.
Fine, but it's not always that useful, as we found out on leg 1 in the winter.
I just hadn't switched it on.
It'd be nice to get up and just to learn how to do it anyway. You know, it's a valuable experience to have, isn't it?
It's a great skill to have, and it's funny with everybody now relying on sat nav in cars. You know, like I've done a lot of orienteering and team adventure race and stuff with Adrian Hennessy, and Adrian's come from being my sidekick to, because he's faster than me, he's as good a navigator now, so he tends to do more of the navigation now if we're on a team. But you know, I got into his car one day and he switches on the sat nav to take him home, and I'm like, what? Just a habit I have. I'm like, why? You know?
Oh, it's mad.
Yeah. Super.
Well done tonight. Anyway, it was good. Brilliant.
I think it went all right. I think it went
It's nice to have something to do anyway, isn't it? It's gone a bit.
I don't know, is there anyone else there? We still have 17 on. Anyone there? Specific questions? I probably should have asked that if people wanted to ask specific questions that weren't in the chat box, but anyone else gone? No one's gone.
It was a good crowd in, wasn't there? It was very good.
Yeah, I think there was 70 something there.
You frightened them off there. Now Paul asking, did they want to ask any questions?
Lorraine.
All right too.
Hi, Moira.
All right too. Anyway, you're. Oh no, who's up? Richard's next up. I should have referenced what's up in 2 weeks' time, but I forgot. Sure, you can't remember everything.
Yeah.
Tortoise and the hare. Oh, I forgot to give the answer anyway. What's the #1 skill for adventure racing? Come on.
Teamwork.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Teamwork and patience.
The P
pacing.
test. Remember, the P test is really important as well.
That's skill techniques. Now that's the next level up, Paul. People have to pay for that information.
Oh, there's one above that now, Paul. You know there's one above that.
What is it? I can't remember now. Of all these things.
Poo without squatting.
What? To be able to poo without squatting? No. Pee without squatting for women. Right?
Somebody poo without squatting in our team.
Who did that? The one thing I remember is coordinated poo stops, coordinated pee stops. Yeah, so you don't waste time. But I stop, and then half an hour later, then Shane is wanting for it.
Shane's still hard up about his pot noodle that was left in Silent Valley.
I'm still dreaming about that pot noodle. Oh,
Do you have anything extra to add to it, Noel, that we missed out on? You're a navigator, and actually it would have been interesting to get your input, Noel, because like a lot of times you're the solo navigator on teams, aren't you?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I know.
Oh yeah, sorry. No, I was eating my dinner. Yeah, but I have found it there, like lately, having Kevin there. I mean, Kaz often does navigating on the bike, and it's a great break. But Kevin out there in Croatia last year, it was just a massive difference to switch off for a leg or two. Yeah. And, you know, again, backing each other up was loads. I don't know, I suppose you could go into specific long adventure races style, like, you know, more naving on the bike and, you know, 300 meters to go, 200 to go, and, you know,